As the Senate and the House work to unify their proposed tax legislation, Americans are wondering how the Republican tax overhaul could affect them. To discuss this is CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger. So, Jill, break it down for us. How will this actually impact the middle class?
You know, it really is weird because this is a plan that is dependent on lots of variables, not the least of which is where you live. Because if you live in a high tax state like California, New York, New Jersey, regardless of whether or not you're in the middle class, you actually may see some tax changes that are not so hot because you cannot deduct your state and local taxes. Think about this. The middle class, loosely defined, means that you earn somewhere between $40,000 and, say, $125,000. Depends where you live, right?
Yeah.
But that's a wide range. But if you don't have your state and local taxes to deduct, if your family size is bigger or smaller than someone else somewhere else in the country, it might have a different impact. I'm going to give you a basic number, though. You ready?
Yeah.
You make 75 grand or so, you're probably going to see in your household 3-4 people, you're probably going to see a tax cut of about $840 on average. 88% will get some sort of reduction, 10% an increase, 2% basically stay the same.
All right, so a lot of variables. Well, tax cuts, as we know, are pretty popular, but polls are showing that the American public is not really in favor of this particular piece of legislation. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a sense that a lot of the emphasis of this plan is about corporations. And so you're sitting at home and you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, do these corporations need a tax cut? After all, we're seeing stock markets at all-time highs. Profits are up pretty strongly. Oh, and by the way, maybe 48%, 47% of Americans don't even own a stock, a bond, or a mutual fund anyway. So why do I care if the companies are getting these big cuts? So that may be one thing. The other part is that there's been a lot of focus on who is really getting the tax cuts on the individual side. And that is definitely flowing disproportionately to the wealthiest Americans. And when I say wealthy, you know, we talked about that range of $40,000 to $125,000 in middle class. There's plenty of people who maybe make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. They're not the ones who are getting the biggest bang. I'm talking about the millionaires, the 10th of 1%. That's where we are seeing the biggest gains flowing. And I think the combination of high-income folks as well as corporations makes it feel like, well, then what's in it for me?
Right. So if those are the winners, who are the losers here?
Well, if you're in one of these high tax states, it's pretty bad because that means that you can no longer deduct your state and local taxes.
That's huge for some people.
It really is. And I know the rationale behind it is essentially that states have to get their own fiscal houses in order. So there is something to be said for that. Of course, if I'm living in a high tax state, then I don't have a lot of control over that. Right. And if my job is either in, New York or California, someplace that does have high taxes, I'm not just moving somewhere else to save my tax dollars.
Right.
So those are definitely losers. I think the other loser may be the tax system as a whole. This was promised to be an easy way to do your taxes. We're going to reform the system. Gosh, it is not easy. You're going to have one big index card to do your taxes on this. So I think that we're losing because I think in many ways the complexity of this deal is really tough. And also remember, a lot of folks who are getting tax cuts today, 5 years from now, some of those provisions go away. So the tax cut you get for the next few years may be something that you don't see 6-7 years down the line.
All right, that's an important point. We hear a lot about small businesses being drivers of the economy. How do small business owners fare?
Well, this is interesting because many small businesses in the United States are structured as something called a pass-through.
Right.
It really is exactly what it sounds like. So you receive income, it passes through your organization, it comes to you, it's taxed at whatever your tax bracket is. So that's a pass-through. That's how the law is currently. Under the Senate proposal, pass-throughs get a very unique opportunity. The opportunity is that they get to deduct 23% of that money and say, lop it off there.
Wow.
So if I made $100,000, I'm going to get taxed on what remains, $77,000. Now, that said, what's kind of interesting is there are a lot of twists and turns to this pass-through, meaning that there are limitations based on if you're a professional organization like a lawyer, a doctor, an architect, a professional service, you may not be able to take advantage of this if your income as an individual is above $250,000. Many critics have said to me, look, this is a really wild area because it's a bit of like, when I say wild, like the Wild West, not the wild in a good way, because there's going to be potential loopholes that people try to take advantage of to qualify as a pass-through. And so because it's complicated, it essentially requires that we have an IRS that's beefed up and ready to police this, because there are going to be a lot of ways to maybe qualify for something that perhaps you really shouldn't be qualified for.
Tax lawyers gearing up all over the country.
Yes, exactly.
CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger. Jill, thanks so much.
Thank you.